All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Iran's Attorney General has issued an ultimatum. He said that anyone taking part in the protests, setting fire to property and causing violence in the streets of Iran and colluding with foreign governments to increase the chaos in the country will be considered an enemy of God. And this is going to be a legal charge in Iran, which carries the death penalty. The latest threat by the Iranian authorities comes as the protests have now entered into the 14th day. They also come a day after the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has said that the government will crack down on the protesters, especially those who resort to violence and arson. But the protests have, of course, continued, and the Iranians continue to defy their leader. Our next report gives you an insight into what is happening at this moment in Iran.
A large crowd gathered at Tehran's Honok Square on Friday night. They gathered around an open fire, singing and dancing in defiance. They were demonstrating against the Iranian government, despite a warning from the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Another set of protesters were seen marching through the streets of Tehran. They were heard chanting slogans calling for the return of the monarchy, the same monarchy that had been ousted in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. More protesters had gathered outside Tehran's Rasul Mosque. They were chanting as a fire near the building engulfed it in smoke. Almost everywhere you looked, people had taken to the streets of Iran's capital. They were marching and chanting against the government despite the crackdown underway. And the demonstrations weren't limited to Tehran. Protesters were seen taking to the streets of the holy city of Mashhad as well. They were seen chanting anti-government and pro-monarchy slogans in a city which houses one of Shia Islam's holiest sites, the Imam Reza Shrine. So even some people in Mashhad want to oust Iran's theocratic government. And not all the protesters are peaceful. In the city of Karaj, near Tehran, some of them set fire to another government building. This is despite Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's direct warning to the people who were damaging public property.
آمدن ساختمان متعلق به کشور خودشون رو خراب کردن. مثلا فرض کنید فلان ساختمان دیواری رو خراب کردن برای اینکه دل رئیس جمهور آمریکا خوش بیاد.
On Friday, Khamenei called some of the protesters vandals and saboteurs. He accused them of destroying public property just to please US President Donald Trump. Trump has threatened the Iranian government with military action if it kills peaceful protesters. And Trump reiterated the warning on Friday.
So Iran's in big trouble. It looks to me that the people are taking over certain cities that nobody thought were really possible just a few weeks ago. We're watching the situation very carefully. I've made the statement very strongly that if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts. And that doesn't mean boots on the ground, but it means hitting them very, very hard where it hurts. So
Khamenei had earlier rejected Trump's statements backing the Iranian protesters. He warned the people of Iran that Trump had killed over 1,000 Iranians just months ago, and anyone who believed him had no sense.
او دستش به خون بیش از 1000 ایرانی آلوده است. در جنگ 12 روزه 1000 و اندی از هممیهنان ما، حالا غیر از سرداران و دانشمندان و بزرگان، از آحاد مردم به شهادت رسیدند.
The Iranian protesters defied Khamenei's warning and continued with their demonstrations on Friday. And they managed to send out videos of their rallies too, despite a reported internet ban in the country. And internet trackers such as NetBlocks say that the country has been without the internet for more than 36 hours. And rights groups say that the government is cracking down on the protesters in this internet blackout. At least 65 people have already been killed in Iran, according to the US-based human rights activists news agency. And now, Iran's Attorney General has warned that all protesters will be considered enemies of God and they will face the death penalty. The Iranian government is planning to prosecute the people they believe are seeking foreign domination over the country. And the state plans to show no leniency, mercy or appeasement. Will this threat be enough to get the Iranian protesters to back down? We'll have to wait and see. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
All right, now joining us all the way from Washington, D.C., we've got Mr. Nader Hashmi. He's an Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at the Georgetown University. Professor Hashmi, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, at this moment, there's a complete internet blackout in Iran, so it's difficult to know as to what is in fact happening there. But in your assessment, looking at some of the images that have still managed to get out of Iran, how much of what is happening at this moment in Iran do you think is driven by public discontent over the economic collapse, and how much of this do you think has been taken over by people who want to, remove the Ayatollah's regime from Tehran?
Well, I think very much what's driving the protests is the latter. In other words, there is a deep and widespread desire among the vast majority of Iranians for structural political change. People want accountable government, representative government. They want an end to the clerical theocracy that rules over them. The protests were certainly sparked by economic discontent, the collapse of the currency, rising inflation. But you can clearly see from the slogans that people are chanting, they're chanting death to the dictator. They're not chanting, we want the inflation rate to drop. So I think that tells you a lot about what's at the core of these protests.
Interesting. Now, one of the names that is doing the rounds is that of Reza Pahlavi. He's clearly testing the waters. He's put out messages where he's asking the Iranians to, in fact, come out and stage protests against the government in Tehran. In your assessment, how much legitimacy does Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah who was ousted from the 1979 revolution, by the 1979 revolution, currently enjoys with the people of Iran? Do you think he is one of those individuals who can claim that he can give a call and the people of Iran will step out? Because that's clearly what he's trying to do.
Yeah, that's what he's trying to do, and perhaps in his own mind, he thinks that he is responsible for these protests, and he certainly has a very sophisticated media operation in Washington, D.C., backed by Israeli intelligence interests, and I'm not just making that up. There's a lot of good reporting on the role that Israeli propaganda has played in elevating the image of the son of the former dictator. It is accurate to say, however, that there are, remnants of supporters of the old regime, most of them who reside in Los Angeles and in other parts of the West, who still, desire to roll back the clock,
right,
and go back to the old days of the monarchy. But I think if you know anything about Iran, Iran is a very sophisticated, highly educated population. They're protesting against authoritarianism. They don't want to replace one authoritarian regime with another authoritarian regime. So my own reading is that, objectively speaking, Reza Pahlavi probably has more supporters in Tel Aviv and in Washington, D.C. than he does on the streets of Tehran today.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Hashmi, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.
So it is a prince who lives in exile in Potomac in the United States of America who is trying to take center stage in this Iranian unrest, at least in the Western media. As protests continue to ripple across Iran, this is a name that seems to be echoing especially with some members of the Iranian diaspora. Reza Pahlavi, he is the son of Iran's last Shah, someone who was ousted from power in 1979. So he's now effectively a prince in exile. He lives in the United States of America, and he's calling the Iranians to rise up, and he's urging them to take to the streets and seize city centers and challenge the authority of the Ayatollahs. But the question, of course, is how much legitimacy does he actually have? The thousands, in fact, appeared to answer the call with chants of death to the dictator and death to the Islamic Republic ringing, even as the authorities moved to shut Iran off from the world with a nationwide internet blackout. In a symbolic and also a sensitive shift, some protesters are even praising the monarchy. Believe it or not, this is what is being reported, that some people on the streets of Iran are shouting, "Long live the Shah," a reference to Pahlavi's father, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who, remember, was overthrown in 1979, the revolution that gave birth to today's Iranian Republic. Now, Pahlavi who left Iran as a teenager and has lived in exile for decades now, is trying to position himself as some kind of a catalyst, pushing for non-violent civil disobedience, but it's already turned very violent with incidents of arson and other violence that has taken place. Now, Reza Pahlavi was born in Tehran and is the eldest son of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and his third wife Farah. His grandfather Reza Shah Pahlavi founded the dynasty, having started as a soldier in the army of King Ahmed Shah Qajar, known then as Reza Khan. The first Pahlavi monarch had ascended the throne in 1925 after leading a coup against Ahmed Shah Qajar. And now, 5 decades after the fall of the second Pahlavi Shah, Iran is hearing this name again. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.